Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh Live, your home for Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Make sure that you like, share, subscribe if you enjoy our content, or you can catch us anywhere you get your podcast from. The Pittsburgh Penguins fell 4-2 to the New York Islanders on Tuesday evening, and well, I'll just say it was fun while it lasted. The Penguins had 4 games and 2 periods of a glimmer of hope for the 2024-25 season, but unfortunately it circled down the drain with a horrid third period performance at PPG Paints Arena. The Pens got out to the start that you would hoped that they would, expected that they would after what we've seen over the last 4 games. Sidney Crosby notches a goal. Juna Koppanen scores his first career goal. Congrats to Juna Koppanen. And the Penguins just played good enough to hold on to that lead through 40 minutes of play, and it came crashing down within the first 30 seconds of the third period. Issues that have plagued the Pittsburgh Penguins over the last 2 calendar years just cropped right up, and there's no team that brings the worst out of the Pens like the New York Islanders, and it happened again on Tuesday night. It's hard to single out individual players for that third period because you could look at almost everybody that was lacing up a pair of skates in black and gold and say, yeah, they didn't have a great third period, except for maybe Vladislav Kolyachonok, because he got benched for absolutely no reason, but I digress on that point. The 3 guys that I looked at as players that struggled above and beyond the rest in that third period: Erik Karlsson and Matt Grzelcyk. That pairing had a rough night in their own zone last night, but Kris Letang especially. And it starts with the falling at the blue line that led to the Kyle Palmieri goal that opened the scoring in the third period for the New York Islanders, but it continued from there. It snowballed for Kris Letang, and he just wasn't able to regain his footing in that final frame, and it led the way for the rest of the team to start to deconstruct the way that they did. The next shift that he had on the ice, he missed a pinch, and the Islanders ended up hitting the post shortly thereafter, and he had a lot of weak clearing attempts throughout the entire third period. He was the epitome of everything that was happening to the Penguins as a team, but he was the guy that was kind of spearheading the effort in the negative direction for the Pittsburgh Penguins. So a rough loss for him, but at the end of the day, like I said, it was fun while it lasted. The Penguins had a 4-game win streak. It was tied for their longest win streak of the season, and with that, they went from 0% chance on moneypuck.com to a 0.1% chance to make the playoffs on moneypuck.com. We talked about it yesterday, saying that this team has 0 margin for error. They're not able to drop any standings points to these teams that they're fighting with, and to go from 2-0 in the third period to losing in regulation on home ice to the New York Islanders, that is a tough pill to swallow for the Pittsburgh Penguins, and a tough night at PPG Paints Arena. Now, there was a little bit of good news that happened yesterday, and that's where I want to look at next. The Pens are heading to Sweden later this year. They will officially play 2 games on November 14th and November 16th against the Nashville Predators, a rematch of the 2017 Stanley Cup final, and that is going to be part of the NHL Global Series for the 2025-26 season. This is the first time that the Penguins have played an international game in the regular season since the 2008-2009 season. That year, all they did was go on to win the Stanley Cup. Now, if you remember those pair of games against the Ottawa Senators like I do, you will remember that the hero of those games was Tyler Kennedy. And that is one of my fondest memories of those years, because in the regular season, things tend to get lost in the shuffle. You always remember the big goals in the playoffs. You always remember the big games in the playoffs, the big stretches in the playoffs. But in the regular season, rarely do you remember a goal like I remember Tyler Kennedy scoring the overtime winner in the season opener against the Ottawa Senators in Stockholm, Sweden. I thought that TK was about to run on for a 40-goal season. I think he ended with 15 or 16, which is pretty normal for Tyler Kennedy. And of course, what he went on to do as a member of that third line with Cook and Stahl in the playoffs was tremendous. But a great memory that was made for all Penguins fans around that time. They're going to have that opportunity once again. in 2025. Now, the question is, are they going to have any Swedes left on the roster by the time they head to Sweden and Stockholm at the end of 2025? Erik Karlsson and Rickard Rakell have been in copious amounts of trade speculation, both on this show and really nationwide, league-wide. Everybody was surprised when Rickard Rakell was still a member of the Pittsburgh Penguins at the end of the trade deadline. And Erik Karlsson, there's a lot of people talking. Nobody expected him to really get dealt before the deadline, but now with the summer coming, with the expansion of the salary cap looming, there's a chance that both Karlsson and Rakell are traded before the Penguins can even touch ground in Europe. That would be unfortunate. Obviously, Rickard Rakell and Karlsson both spoke upon this yesterday after the morning skate. Rakell saying that, it will be the first opportunity in a very long time for his 90-year-old grandmother to see him play hockey. That's what we all want to see. Now, Rakell, I think, is more likely to be a member of the Penguins than Karlsson is. To me, it feels like the writing is on the wall with Erik Karlsson. I might be wrong, and this might be, old takes exposed in a few months, but it feels like the Penguins are ready to move on from the Erik Karlsson experiment. That's the reason that they turned in the other direction to become a rebuilding team this year. And I think that is the reason that he's also going to be on the trade market a lot of this summer. Rickard Rakell is an interesting one. People thought his stock was at an all-time high at the trade deadline. I have a hard time refuting that. But at the same time, I think the fact that, we've heard rumors, we've heard reports that the price tag for Rickard Rakell was 2 first-round picks and a top-tier prospect. That makes it seem like the Penguins are in no rush to trade Rakell anytime soon. And that includes this offseason. You can have your opinions about whether or not that's a good thing. But that's just the way that it's starting to feel. Again, things can change between now and June 1st. But it feels like Rickard Rakell has much more of his feet firmly planted than Erik Karlsson does with the Penguins organization. I'm going to go next to the 3 stars of the week, but after that, I'm going to answer all of your questions. So if you're tuned in live on YouTube at Tip of the Iceberg, make sure that you drop your questions in the comment section below in the live chat, and we will get to as many as possible before we head out today. But before we do that, let's go to the 3 stars of the week, in my opinion. Let me know what you think the 3 stars of this past week have been. Number 3, somebody who we've talked a lot about this week. I think we've mentioned on both Monday and Tuesday's episode, and when that happens, typically they wind up finding their way into the 3 stars of the week segment, and here we are again. 3 games played this week, 3 goals in those 3 games. Connor Dewar, he is creating a lot of offense in the bottom 6 with Noel Acciari and Blake Lizotte, and that line was great again last night. Now, they were broken up, and I'll get to that in a second, but in the first period, there was 3 or 4 consecutive shifts for this line where they came out in the defensive zone faceoff. Even if they didn't win the draw, they didn't give up a singular shot on goal on that shift. They flipped zones. They ended up in the offensive zone, whether that be getting a shot on goal and getting a stoppage. Crosby's line would obviously come out, or whether they forced a icing, which ultimately led to another offensive zone faceoff. There was 3 or 4 shifts in a row where Dewar, Lizotte, and Acciari were nearly automatic in flipping the ice on the New York Islanders. And that is something that Mike Sullivan is going to value incredibly high. Now, he valued it so much, in fact, that Connor Dewar eventually earned a promotion in the middle of that game. I don't know if it was the way that Connor Dewar has been playing. I don't know if it's the way that Danton Heinen's been playing, going the other direction. I don't know if it's a mixture of both. It probably is. But Connor Dewar ends up playing with Evgeni Malkin and Phil Tomasino for the second half of that game, and he did not look out of place. Whenever the Penguins acquired him back at the deadline, I said, all right, that's a 4th liner, 3rd liner maybe if he plays well. But he looked pretty good on that second line next to Evgeni Malkin and Phil Tomasino. Now, Malkin and Tomasino have carved out a nice little relationship here over the last 4 or 5 weeks. If you can get a 3rd in Connor Dewar and have those 3 running together the rest of the season, that would be great. But as I know, and I've now learned, don't try to put line combinations in pen with this version of the Pittsburgh Penguins, because the only line that is safe from the juggling act that is Mike Sullivan is Crosby, Rust, and Rakell. Outside of that, lines aren't going to remain the same for more than 3 games. That's just a fact of life at this point. So we'll see where Dewar ends up starting next game, but he played well mid-game with that second line. 61% of the shot attempts for those 3 in 8 minutes of 5-on-5 ice time. I liked what I saw from him. I've loved what I've seen from him over the past week, which is why he clocks in as the number 3 star of the week. At number 2, gonna throw a curveball at you guys here. Number 2 star of the week is going to be Sidney Crosby. 3 games played, 1 goal, which was a crazy chop goal that got the Penguins up 2-0 with about 18 seconds left in the first period yesterday. 3 assists as well for Sid in the past week. He passed Wayne Gretzky last night for the 4th most points by any player on one singular team. And he is also 6 points away now from Wayne Gretzky's point per game season record. He's a freak, right? We say this every single episode. Every Monday and Wednesday, I have the same conversation because he's always number 1 on the power rankings, and he always has a spot, whether that's first, second, or third, on the 3 stars of the week. But he has created, along with Rust and Rakell, multiple grade A chances per shift over the last couple of games. The guy is 37 years old, and he is still the best player on the ice night in and night out, not just for the Penguins, but for whoever they're playing. And that includes whenever they're playing teams like the Edmonton Oilers. He goes toe-to-toe with guys like Connor McDavid. He goes toe-to-toe with guys like Nathan MacKinnon. I have a hard time having the realization that anybody can stand toe-to-toe with him in any given singular game. Now, over a full 82-game season, yeah, these other guys are going to put up 6-point nights, 5-point nights. Crosby probably not going to be able to do that because the chances just aren't going to be there. But he is creating so much offense right now for the Penguins. He is playing such a high level for the Penguins. It is hard to refute how good he has been and why he deserves to be. Honestly, if the Penguins weren't so bad, he probably deserves a couple votes in the Hart Trophy voting, probably 5th place votes, but votes nonetheless. And the number 1 star of this week, and the number 1 star in a lot of people's hearts over the last couple of weeks, that's going to go to Tristan Jarry. 3 games played. He has a 2-1 record in the last calendar week. 3.0 goals against average, and a .909 save percentage. He has made 5 consecutive starts since being recalled from the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins. He's likely to get 6. Nothing in that game on Tuesday night tells me that he is not still the hot hand by leaps and bounds. So I would not be surprised in the least if Tristan Jarry is between the pipes once again on Friday against the Columbus Blue Jackets. He's earned it. He's the primary reason that they've been playing so well over the past week. He is the primary reason that the Penguins had won 4 consecutive games going into last night. And he was the primary reason last night that they went into the third period up 2-0. Would he have probably liked that third goal, that game-winning goal back? Yeah, that one was a little bit leaky. He was a little bit off of his angle. And I will also say it looked like there was a little bit of a deflection or a redirection off of Ryan Graves' stick. But that's a timely save that you hope Tristan Jarry makes more times than not. He wasn't able to make it last night, but it doesn't wipe out the fact that they wouldn't have been in that position to blow a lead in the first place if not for the way that Tristan Jarry stood on his head. Made 15 saves, I believe, in the first period of play. He's been dominant in the opening frame since coming back from the Wilkes-Barre, and he has an above .910 save percentage in 4 of his 5 starts since coming back. The guy is pretty automatic at a position that the Penguins have not seen that from in a very long time. Again, it's 5 games. It's a small sample size. I'm not giving this kid the net for the next 3 years that his contract says he will. I'm not saying that he has made up for all the struggles that he has had, but I am saying if you distill it down to the last 7 calendar days and the last 3 matchups, Tristan Jarry is undoubtedly the MVP of the Pittsburgh Penguins, very narrowly ahead of Sidney Crosby. So that's why Jarry gets the number 1 star, Crosby gets the number 2 star, and the number 3 star goes to the newcomer, Connor Dewar. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, answering all of your questions. So if you're tuned in live on Tip of the Ice-Burgh on YouTube, make sure that you drop a question in the comment section below, and we will get to as many as we can before we head out here today. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the tip of the iceberg, trying to get the hang of the issues that we're having with StreamYard in the commercial break, but also trying to shorten those commercial breaks during the live streams here. Got plenty of good questions that we're going to get to. Let's start with a fellow Nick. Nicholas without the H. Shout out to Nicholas for jumping in. Says, hey, Nick, since Kyle Dubas wants to bring our prospects from the AHL or to the AHL level, how many new prospects can you see joining the team next year? Okay, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I'll bring up Penguins Puckpedia because they have a pretty good database of players like that. Wow, trying to make sure that I'm a human. That's different for that website. But I do think that, let me get down here to some of the other names. Defense-wise, I'm not sure about Harrison Brunick and Emil Pieneniemi. They're close. They have their ELC signed, but I'm not sure whether or not the Penguins are going to think that they're at the point in the development where they need to come up, or if they think that there's still more value in them staying down at the junior level. Any other names that jump out off the page? I'm trying to figure out here. There was one I was trying to think of that I just has escaped me completely when you asked that question. He just signed. I think Chase Piatella is one of them. Obviously, he's with the AHL team now on an AHL tryout contract. And there was one other guy that I wanted to mention. Tanner Howe is the other one that I would look at. Tanner Howe is a guy that I believe is running out of eligibility at the junior level. He's a guy that was a captain for the Regina Pats, was traded this year to Calgary, and he's been having a really good season after starting the year on the shelf due to an injury. So Tanner Howe is definitely one that I'd be looking at. And then you look at those defensive prospects, could be a Piatella, could be a Emil Pieneniemi, could be a Harrison Brunick. It all depends on how the Penguins view them and the end of their seasons this year and what we could see next year. But again, the Penguins have valued bringing these guys over to the American Hockey League. There was a huge shift this past season where you're seeing the McGroartys, where you're seeing the Koivunens, where you're seeing the Murashovs. I don't think we're going to get that many new prospects that join the AHL level, but I do think that this trend will continue. So I appreciate you jumping in and catching on that trend, Nick. Let's go to Evan, who says, what is with Sully's unwillingness to bench the veterans like Letang if they're having a rough game? He just doesn't do it. He never has. He's never going to, right? There's certain things that coaches like Sullivan are just not going to do. And benching a guy like Letang is not it. I don't understand why Kolyachonok got benched for most of the third period after that fumble at the beginning of the period where that led to the Islanders' opening goal. But, I mean, that was a lot on Letang, right? He tries to make the play with his skate instead of sticking his stick out there. Now, again, he was in a weird position. The pass could have been a lot better, but he blows a tire, dives instead of just hustling to get back, and ends up being a clear breakaway from the blue line in. Now, Letang also had a rough couple of other shifts, like I mentioned, but I don't think Sullivan is in the habit of benching veterans. He never does, especially if they're stars, right? Last year, Jeff Carter, 2 years ago, because Jeff Carter was fine last year. 2 years ago, Carter struggled, barely missed a shift. So I don't know why he does it. You're going to have to ask Mike Sullivan that one, but all I know is I don't expect it to stop anytime soon. Let's go to Flux CC. Shout out to Matt, who's joining us every single week. Says, I saw Wes Clark, very big name when it comes to Penguin scouting, tweeted from the Djurgården. I don't know how to say that, but European arena with a couple of very good prospects. He must have been scouting DIF for the draft. Who would you rather take, Anton Frundell or Victor Eklund? I've heard more about Anton Frundell, but I will refer this question to Jesse Marshall, and I'm sure, Matt, that you've reached out to Jesse about this one, but he has done a lot more research into this draft class than I have. I've looked at pretty much Porter Martone and Michael Misa. Like that, those are the two players that I have looked at. I have not gotten a chance to look at anybody outside of those two, but I'll tell you one thing. I really like Porter Martone. I do. Of these two, I've heard more about Frundell, but I've also heard that Eklund is a very solid prospect as well. So I couldn't tell you. I would refer you to somebody who's done a lot more research in that category in Jesse Marshall. Let's go to Evan again, who says, this is sort of Penguins related, but if you could choose one of Quinn Hughes or Cale Makar to be on the Penguins, who would you choose? I don't want to get it mixed up that I don't think Quinn Hughes is a good player, because I think he's a phenomenal player. I think Quinn Hughes is probably the leader in the clubhouse for the Norris Trophy this year. Deservedly so, especially if he comes back healthy and is as good as he was before he went on the shelf. I'm not sure if he's back or not yet. But Cale Makar is a generational talent on the blue line. Quinn Hughes is a superstar. Don't get me wrong. Cale Makar, when all is said and done, might be a Mount Rushmore of defensemen. He might be number 4, but he might be a Mount Rushmore of defensemen when all is said and done. The way that he is able to just create space, the way that he's able to carry the puck, the shot that he has, the entire package, it's Cale Makar. I love Quinn Hughes. Either of them would be a huge get for the Penguins, obviously. But to me, Cale Makar is just levels above everybody else at the defensive position in the National Hockey League right now. Great question, though, Evan. Let's go to Kristen, who says, huge fan of the podcast. Love to hear it. Let's talk free agency. If Mitch Marner hits free agency, what do you think the % chance is that the Penguins get him, and why? Also, I like Phil Tomasino contract-wise. What would you give him? Okay, let's start with Marner. If he hits free agency, which I don't know how to read that situation. It's Darren Ferris. Darren Ferris is Mitch Marner's agent. So with that, you always have to say, yeah, there's a good chance that we could see him take his player to the free agent market. I think a lot has changed since Mikko Rantanen set the market for UFAs this year. So I think right now it would be more likely that Marner is able to get a deal done before free agency than actually getting to July 1st and getting to the start of free agency. But if, in this hypothetical, if he gets to free agency, the Penguins still have a slim chance. Now, there is the previous relationship between Kyle Dubas and Mitch Marner. There is the current relationship, and we saw it at the Four Nations face-off between Sidney Crosby and Mitch Marner. And the Penguins are going to have a lot of cap space and can just throw a lot of money at the problem, which would be that they're missing a top-gear superstar that's playing in their top 6. Ever since they got rid of Gensel, that's been a problem. Marner would fix what ails them in that category, but I still put the % chance that they're able to bring him in as probably around 10 to 15, and that's if he already is on the market. And I think I'm more optimistic than most. I'm more optimistic than most just simply because I think that there's more to the story that we don't know in Toronto. It just feels like there's always more in Toronto than what everybody knows, and that media market makes sure that they get a lot out. But there's always something extra to stories that come out of Toronto. But I think Mitch Marner, at this stage of his career, he hasn't been able to win anything in Toronto. He probably wants to win. If he comes to Pittsburgh, you're going to have to squint real hard to see a winner, even with Mitch Marner brought in alongside Crosby at age 38 and Malkin at age 39 and Letang at age 39. You'd have to squint real hard, even with a perennial 100-point scorer that Mitch Marner has been for the last couple of seasons. As far as Phil Tomasino, I would give him a multi-year contract. He's a restricted free agent, so you do have him under control. You don't have to worry about outbidding anybody else unless, of course, we start to see offer sheets used more often. There was 2 last year from the St. Louis Blues. Maybe that opens the floodgates. If it does, the Penguins are going to be a little screwed because Phil Tomasino is a guy that would be a prime candidate for an offer sheet from some other contending teams that don't quite care if they overpay a little bit and don't quite care if they lose a draft pick over it. Phil Tomasino has created a market for himself, even if he's not going to be able to go to the open market. He's played extremely well since joining the Penguins. He's on a 20-goal pace on 82 games with the Penguins, right? He's played in just over 40 games. He scored 10 goals. He has 6 game winners, which is tied for the team lead. He's a great player. I would love to get him under a 3-year contract. And if I'm Kyle Dubas, I want to keep that around $2 million. Is he going to be able to? That's going to depend upon the market. That's going to depend upon who signs before Phil Tomasino that's at his level of player. But 3 years, $2 million, that's essentially the deal that he gave Noel Acciari, so it might be a little unrealistic. That's what I would love to get him signed to. That is a team-friendly deal for the Penguins for Phil Tomasino. Maybe he wants a little bit more money, or maybe he views this as, well, I went to the Penguins and my career took off more than it has anywhere else. I want to stay in Pittsburgh. I want to be part of this. Maybe I take a little bit off the top to make sure that I stay here and earn a little bit more on that next contract whenever I hit unrestricted free agency at the age of 27. So those are my thoughts. Appreciate you tuning in and appreciate you throwing in a question, Kristen. Let's go to Randy, who says, hey, Nick, what are your thoughts on the fact that we've been investing in all these forward prospects, but what about defensively? We have Owen Pickering, but that's it, in my opinion. I have to disagree with you, Randy. Owen Pickering is the figurehead. Owen Pickering is the face of Penguins defensive prospects. But this year, there have been 2 that have come out of the woodwork, and one is in the comment section below from Flux CC. Finn Harding has come out of nowhere and has been electrifying in the OHL. Emil Pieneniemi has come over from Europe to North America to play in the OHL this year, and he's having a great season. Both of those 2 are, I believe, in the top 10 still of defensive scoring in the OHL. You have, I believe, Chase Piatello. There's Chase and there's Logan. I need to remember which one is which. But one of the Piatellas just signed. He's a good college prospect that's coming to the AHL to finish out the season, then start his ELC next year. And then there's a couple other ones as well. So the Penguins, Harrison Brunick is the name I was trying to think of. Harrison Brunick is number 2. No matter how good Finn Harding's season is, no matter how good Emil Pieneniemi's season is, in my eyes, Harrison Brunick is number 2 until somebody comes to Pittsburgh and supplants him in that role. Harrison Brunick was electrifying in preseason hockey with the Penguins, and he almost earned a spot on the opening night roster. He was here till the bitter end of training camp before the Penguins sent him back to juniors. So they have a lot of defensive prospects that have come out of the woodwork this year. They're just not at the AHL or NHL level yet. They're a little bit younger. They're a little bit further away. Whereas the forwards, you probably heard a lot more about them because they're all in the AHL, right? Tristan Brose, Rucker McGroarty, Ville Koivunen, Vasily Ponomarev. They're all right there, right at the doorstep of the Penguins organization at the highest level. Defense-wise, they have some names. They have some players, and it's not perfect. They're not among the top 10 in any category except for maybe goaltending when it comes to prospects. But their defensive prospect system has taken massive steps and looked at and seen massive improvements throughout this year, thanks to the development of some guys that were already in the system. A guy like Emil Pieneniemi, who was a second-round pick last year, was able to make strides by moving over to North America. So I get what you're saying. A lot of the most visible prospects are all forwards, but one, I think there's a lot of really good defensive prospects that are going to start getting a lot louder going into next season. And 2, there's more forward spots on an NHL roster than there are defense. And I know that's Captain Obvious, and I don't mean to be condescending in that, but in general, they're going to sign more and get more forward prospects because they got 12 positions to fill versus 6 on an NHL roster. Twice as many, which is why you're going to see twice as many forwards that got brought up. Let's go to healthy scratch 31. Does that mean you've been healthy scratch 31 times or your number's 31? And I digress. Let's go to healthy scratch 31, who says, how likely do you think it is that Dubas will trade up in the draft no matter where the Penguins finish? This year, I don't see it as very likely. There is a clear distinction between the top 4 in this draft and the rest of it. That has been the overwhelming belief from everybody, is that it is Matthew Schaefer, Michael Misa, James Higgins, and Porter Martone, and then there's a little bit of a drop-off. The Penguins would love to be in that top 4. Thanks to this 4-game win streak, it's going to be harder for them to climb into that top 4 naturally. But I don't think this is the year that Kyle Dubas expounds assets to move up into the top 4. Because while those players are a step above anybody who's going to go 7th, 8th, 9th, I don't think it is enough to warrant trading up into those spots. We don't see it happen very often where teams get very active at the top half of the NHL draft. It's not similar at all to the NFL draft where there could be a lot of movement. But I don't think this is the year to do it. If there's a year to trade up and say we want to be in this position and draft a prospect of this caliber, I think it's next year. I don't think it's this year. So I don't think it's likely that Dubas ends up trading up, even though there is a clear distinction between the top 4 and then the rest of the top 15 after that. Let's go to Andrew, who says, did you mention Daniel Latch going to the AHL next season? Another possibility. Somebody who signed a 2-year ELC just about last week and could be making his way as early as next season. So yeah, add that to the list. Shout out to Andrew. Let's go to Brandon, who says, hey, Nick. Sorry, I'm saving some other questions here. You guys are doing a great job feeding me these. Brandon says, hey, Nick, Sully has to understand the NHL is getting younger. Why is scratching and benching the younger guys when he should embrace their wanting to score and be fast? I mean, Mike Sullivan, I think, gets a negative rap most of the time for disliking young players. He doesn't dislike young players. He dislikes the mistakes they make, and he punishes them a little bit harder than he should. That's the thing. It's not like he doesn't like them. It's not like he doesn't want to give them opportunities. He just isn't patient enough. And I think we saw that last night with Vlad Kolyachonok, because if he just didn't like young players, Kolyachonok wouldn't be playing 20-plus minutes a night on a pairing with Kris Letang. When Ryan Shea went down, they would have said, all right, well, we need to call up Owen Pickering. Oh, wait, that's a young player too. So these guys are going to get opportunities. I think Sully is harder on the young guys than he should be, but I don't think he dislikes or hates or doesn't want to give opportunity to younger players. I've seen that a lot. Now, do I think his trigger is a little too quick when it comes to younger players versus veterans making mistakes? Yeah, because young players make mistakes. It's bound to happen. And this is the season to allow it to happen. You are in 7th or 8th in the Metropolitan Division, and that's not changing in the last 12 games. Let these guys make mistakes. Like, Kolyachonok didn't make a mistake. Like, I didn't see him make an egregious mistake that would cause him to get benched last night in the 3rd period. I didn't see it, but it's going to happen. Like, he's going to make a mistake. Rucker McGroarty's going to make mistakes next year. You have to let these guys make mistakes and learn from it. You can't strip away ice time. So I agree with that aspect. I just don't agree when people go to the 10th degree and say he hates prospects. He's never going to give them a chance. He doesn't, but he does need to get a little bit less trigger happy with the benching of the younger players. Let's go to Flux CC, who's asking me CBA questions now. Love it. Says, would you like an 84-game season with a shorter preseason? Like some insiders have mentioned, it is being considered by the general managers. I don't really care to see more games. 82 games is more than enough. I liked the 70-game season. Like, trust me, I'm not going to complain about more hockey, but I don't think we need a longer regular season. I don't think that is necessary. Now, it's a gate-driven league, so will it happen? Yes, because not many people go to preseason games, and if you added 2 games to the regular season, each team gets another home game, yeah, a lot of people are going to vote that in because they want another game of regular season attendance. It's a gate-driven league. It's bound to happen. Do I care for it? No. I think the season is long enough. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to complain about it. Like, it's no skin off my back. So if they want to do it, they're going to do it. I really don't have a real opinion on it other than like the season is long enough. You don't need to add more games, and cutting the preseason is a good thing. I think they should just do that in general. But no, I don't have too many overwhelming urges to make a hot take on the 84 game season, but appreciate the question. Let's go to Evan, who says, what contract do you see Tomasino getting? Answer that earlier. I want a 2-3 year deal, something in that range, and $2 to $2.5 million. Will they get that for him? Probably not. And Evan even just said, never mind, you just answered that. So that just tells me how far behind I am on looking at these questions here. Let's go to Evan's next question here. Makeup time. What do you think the timeline is for Murashov to get a chance at the NHL? He's been lighting the lamp in the AHL. Has he? Has he scored? I mean, it might have just been a turn of phrase, but like, I don't think he has. I think that would have been viral, but he's been very good. He has been extremely good. He started his career 8-0 at the AHL level. He's breaking organizational records in the minors. He's shut down the entire ECHL. So he's clearly too good for that league. And at the AHL level, he's establishing himself as one of the most dominant presences in net minding in that league as well. The timeline is as early as next season, possibly. Again, there's a lot in front of him. Joel Blomqvist, Philip Larson, who deserves to be in this conversation. Tristan Jarry is still under contract, and that's, it's a factor. And so is Alex Nedeljkovic. Nedeljkovic signed a 2-year deal. So there's a lot of hurdles in front of him. Talent-wise, he's probably ready for at least a cup of coffee next season. But organization-wise, there's a lot of hurdles. There's a lot of moving and shaking that needs to be done for Sergei Murashov to get more than just hey, here's a spot start at the NHL level. Let's go to Patrick, who says, would you prefer the Rangers pick this season, assuming they miss the playoffs, so it's at 16 or below, or take a chance on their unrestricted first next season? I go back and forth on this because there is a chance that the Rangers figure it out for next year. And mainly that hinges upon nothing other than Igor Shesterkin, because at his best, he's a Vezina caliber guy that could be the best goaltender in the league. And whenever I'm projecting, the easiest thing to project is not easiest thing to project, but the easiest way to guide you is how do you expect the goaltending to perform? If Igor Shesterkin's good, the Rangers will be better next year. A la the draft pick will be worse. So with that in mind, yeah, I'd like to have the higher of the 2 draft picks. But at the same time, the potential of next year's draft, if it is as good and it remains on the trajectory that it's on, I would take the 24th pick in next year's draft over the 16th pick in this year's draft. It's just about depth of the draft. And it also comes down to, are you able to scout and pick the correct player for your organization? But I think as of right now, I would be okay if the Rangers said, you know what, we're going to hold on to this one. They end up getting into that top 13 protection and they give it to the Penguins for next year, because that also gives the Penguins a more extended timeline to potentially utilize that draft pick in a different way, to be able to trade it, to be able to use it to offload something. The Penguins have 30 draft picks over the next 3 drafts, and they have the most draft picks in the first 3 rounds of anybody in the National Hockey League. Utilize that, not only to draft a player that could potentially be a part of your future, but utilize that to create flexibility with the cap. Utilize that to bring in more talent that is already NHL ready. I think if you push it back to 2026, it leaves the door open for more options, which is why I lean towards it. But either way, I mean, it's a first-round pick. You're happy with it, and you're hoping that whatever they do with it, whether it's in 2025 or 2026, that they just utilize it correctly. Let's go to Dabton, who says, going back to the beginning of the year talks on the podcast, has Sam Poulin proven himself? I don't watch the AHL games much, but every time I have, he's been on the star player of the game list. The problem is with Sam Poulin, he was a heck of an AHL player last year. Didn't look like he really was at home at the NHL level. This year, hasn't looked at home when he's been given the chance at the NHL level, but he's been a pretty good AHL player. The problem is he's been passed up. He's a bottom 6 player on that team now. Now, he's a good bottom 6 player. He's playing well. He's a great AHL player. He's a great piece to that team, and he's going to be important to whatever length run they go on, but he hasn't proven himself because he has to prove himself at the next level. We knew that this guy could go on runs at the American League. But what we needed to know is, can the 2019 first round pick become a piece for the NHL team? And he hasn't proven that yet. Will he get the opportunity to? Maybe, or maybe not. Like I said, he's been passed up at the AHL level from some guys that are going to deserve chances next year. Guys like Rutger McGroarty, guys like Ville Koivunen, guys like Tristan Brose is hot on his coattails. So no, going back to those early year talks about Sam Poulin and saying that he needs to prove himself this year, I don't think he has. He's shown to be exactly what he's showed to be last year, and we just needed a little bit more. At least that's in my eyes. Let's go down to Randy, who says, thanks for the answer. Appreciate you tuning in. So, of course, do you see any easy fixes or possible new players that can help our blue line next year? No, there's no easy fixes to this blue line. When it's as dysfunctional as it is, there's no easy fixes. Let me try to bring up this year's crop of free agent defensemen to see if there's anybody that you could bring in that would actually be a nice addition. Now, the problem with the Penguins is going into this offseason, they are going to potentially need 3 top 4 defenders. And the fourth one that would remain in Pittsburgh would be 38 or 39-year-old Kris Letang. I'm forgetting how old he is now. But it would be advanced age Kris Letang and then question marks. Is Vlad Kolyachonok able to do that over an 82-game season? Is Owen Pickering, who looked pretty good in his cup of coffee, in his stint, it was more than a cup of coffee, he played over 20 games, but Pickering looked pretty good in that role at times. Is he able to do that over 82 games as early as next year? Is Ryan Graves able to move up in the lineup? There's so many question marks with this Penguins defense going into next year that you might need to take some big swings. I mean, defense-wise, you have Brent Burns, doesn't really enthuse me. Dmitry Orlov, no. Ekblad, no. Provorov's interesting. That would be expensive, but it could go either way with him. Gavrikov, didn't he not just sign? Or are we on a different one? No, he's on the last year of his contract. Gavrikov would be interesting. There's names out there, but at the end of the day, the Penguins aren't going to be able to just take one big swing and fix their defense. This is something that needs to be fixed with a lot of little moves that all pan out. And that's why yesterday I say, maybe you keep Matt Grzelcyk. Maybe you re-sign him. Because if Karlsson's gone, Grzelcyk will probably play better defensively. At least his numbers should look better defensively if he's playing with somebody that plays a little bit better. If he's not having to bail out Erik Karlsson all the time, you would imagine that his level of defensive play rises. But that's why you maybe think about re-signing him. Because it's somebody who you already have answers on. And there's so many other question marks that maybe you bring him back on a cheap deal. And again, worst comes to worst, you can trade him. They chose not to this year, but you can trade him because his stock has gone from absolutely zero when he left Boston, was a healthy scratch in the playoffs, to he could have fetched a second-round pick. And I understand, seller's market, but he could have fetched a second-round pick at the trade deadline this year. That's how much they've revived his value in the eyes of the league. Who's to say they can't do it again for a couple of months at the start of the 2025-26 season while they try to figure out some answers to some of these other questions? Let's go to Flux CC again, who said, Ville Koivunen is 3rd in the entire AHL in scoring as a rookie. Did Dubas ninja cook in that Gensel trade? Dubas did very well in the Jake Gensel trade, and it continues to grow because he got Koivunen, who looks very good at the AHL level, looks very ready to transfer those skills to the NHL level. Vasily Ponomarev looks like he could be a bottom 6 piece, a reliable guy night in and night out for a bottom 6 center position. Cruz Lucius has had a pretty good year. Harrison Brunick as a second-round pick is extremely good. And then you have to look at the Michael Bunting trade because, again, I love trade trees, and this Gensel trade tree is just getting started. Michael Bunting turned into, in part, Luke Schenn, which turned into a second-round pick, and then Tommy Novak. So you look at all the pieces that he was able to get. No, there's nobody that, as of right now, is going to come close to the talent of Jake Gensel. but you have 4 or 5 players that could potentially be contributors to the next wave of successful Penguins hockey. And that is exactly what your goal is when you're trading away players like that to kick off a rebuild. Let's go down to Brandon, who says, should the Penguins go after Mason McTavish this offseason? He's 22 and perfect to help along the rebuild with us. Mason McTavish would be at the very top of my wish list, below of all the players that we've talked about that could be on the move, below JJ Peterka. If Peterka is still available, he tops my wish list. As far as young players that could be traded, it's Peterka, and then it's McTavish. The problem is, I don't think the Anaheim Ducks are eager to move on from Mason McTavish. It seems like he is a very big part of their plan moving forward, and their plan has been running up against a brick wall for a long time. So trading away a guy like McTavish doesn't seem like anything that would be in their future plans in the short term or the long term. So I do really like McTavish. I agree with you. He's perfect at 22. He brings physicality. He can score. He is a good skater, but I just don't think that the Anaheim Ducks are going to be willing to part with a player of that caliber right now. Let's go to Tristan again, who says, not really a question, but I'm really happy with Kyle Dubas. There's some haters, but look at what has gone out versus come in. I'm giving him a solid A grade, would be an A+, but I don't like the Karlsson trade. Here's the thing with Kyle Dubas. And again, my opinion, you can disagree with it if you want. If you break down his time with the Penguins, short period of time, but if you break it down to his last-ditch effort to give the Penguins a jolt, which was his first offseason, and everything since, which is the Gensel trade and beyond. Since the Gensel trade, it's hard to argue that he hasn't been one of the best general managers in hockey. Before that, complete opposite end of the spectrum. When he was trying to just get those last couple of pieces to push the Penguins over the finish line into the playoffs and back into glory, Karlsson trade didn't work out. I think it was a well-worthy experiment with that, considering you gave up a first-round pick, and yeah, that first-round pick could have been a very good player, but outside of that, you got rid of all your problem contracts, literally all of them. It was a worthwhile experiment. It just didn't work. The Jarry move, again, you can make the arguments. At the end of the day, it didn't work. We can go back in hindsight and say, well, Jarry's been absolutely abysmal, but you can also look back and say, what did he do in that offseason? He tried to get all the free spaces, and none of the free spaces hit. He signed the best free agent goaltender there, which was Jarry. He signed the top free agent defenseman, which was Graves. And then he acquired the biggest name on the trade market all summer long, which was Karlsson. None of them worked. None of them worked. Historic fumble in that offseason from Kyle Dubas. And he got a lot of heat for that, and that's deservedly so. And he put himself in a corner, and he's been punching his way out ever since. But he's landed a lot of those punches. That's what I'll say. So I agree with you, Kristen. I like your assessment of Kyle Dubas to this point. I don't know if I'd give him an A. I'm a little bit of a harder grader, but I think since the Jake Gensel trade, I'm with you. It's an A. But before that, D-F. So I think it levels out here to like a B- is where I'd say I'd have Kyle Dubas so far, but a lot remains. That was a 7-year contract. He's only in year 2. Let's see what the rest of his plan looks like. Let's go to Patrick, who says, what about this blue line for next season? Owen Pickering and Kris Letang, Kolyachonok, and whoever you get in an EK trade, plus Graves and Timmins. I like Owen Pickering coming up. I think it's going to be about time next year that Owen Pickering is going to be ready to be an everyday NHL defenseman. Sticking him next to Kris Letang, that's a heavy lift. That's a heavy lift. But you know what? Owen Pickering was a first-round pick. Owen Pickering was a player that was very well received by fans at the NHL level and very well received by the organization at the NHL level this year. So maybe you do see that. Kolyachonok, I like as the number 2 guy. The only problem there is your 1-2 being 2 young kids, 23 and 22 years old, and Kolyachonok and Pickering. That's risky. That's risky because neither of them have played a full 82-game season yet. And that is something that is not thought about enough, I think. So I think there's a lot of upside there. I don't think you're getting a number 2 defenseman in an EK trade, but you probably do replace him anyway. So I don't hate this blue line. I think if it ended up being that, it's fine. Do I think it is better than this year's blue line? Not substantially. Probably, if anything, just a little bit. But again, I think there's going to be a lot more moves coming from the Penguins on the back end to try to kind of fix that and make sure that they're not leaving so many opportunities for these exciting young goaltenders that are going to get more and more opportunities as time goes on. Let's go to Nicholas again, who says, I got another one non-Penguins related. Would you rather get a $5,000 a year or $5,000 a year, but your only days off are when it rains, or $80,000 a year and you only have to work when it rains? Now, here's the important question. Where do I live? If I live in Pittsburgh, I'd take the $500K a year and only work when it rains, because it rains a lot in Pittsburgh. If I work in Seattle, then 1,000%, I'm taking $500K a year. If I work where I live now, which is the DMV, which is Washington, D.C., I would probably take the $80K, because I rarely work. It doesn't rain very often in the DMV. It just doesn't. If I'm remembering correctly, and I've lived down here for 5 years, there's way more sunny days or way more just cloudy days than there is rainy days. So you know what? I would take the $80K to only have to work when it rains, because I mean, right now I'm looking outside and it's sunny, so I should be off, and I should also be getting a raise here. So I think it depends on where you live. If I lived where I do now, and that's the question, then I'll take the $80K and only work when it rains, because when it's sunny out, who wants to work anyway? Let's go to Iconic Hair, who says, if we keep the same defenseman for next season and the same coach, so the same team defense, shouldn't we expect to be dreadful defensively again? Yes and no. The Penguins had the exact same players except for Matt Grzelcyk, and then they changed the coach of the power play. That's very minimal changes to the Penguins power play. And it went from 30th in the NHL last year to top 10 consistently this year. So there is a matter of, one, performances swinging in the opposite direction. And then there's also the matter of these young players who get an opportunity to grow. Same defense means Vladislav Kolyachonok. If he gets better going from age 23 to age 24, which is quite the possibility, then the team defense should get better, because that one piece is going to be a little bit better. I understand what you're saying. It's the definition of an insanity and everything that we always talk about with that. I don't think the team is going to have the same defense. Like I said at the beginning of the show, I do think that Erik Karlsson is more likely to be moved than not, and that's my personal opinion. That's not anything other than speculation, but it's my personal opinion, and it's how I feel. So I think you're going to look at a different defense. You're going to have the same coach, because while the team defense hasn't been great, the way David Quinn was able to revitalize that power play is going to give him a little bit more of a buffer, and I just don't think the Penguins are into trying to find another defensive coach for a second year in a row. But I do think that there's going to be changes. So you're not going to even have to raise this question of insanity, because there's going to be enough new for you to say, all right, well, there's enough new factors in here. It's not insanity, but there's a chance it still could be bad. Let's go to Jackson McKnight, who says, is Rutger McGroarty going to come up to the Penguins next year? I would bet on it. Now, the thing about betting is sometimes you lose, but I would be surprised if Rutger McGroarty isn't at the NHL level next season and isn't a full-timer by the end of next season. Now, there's a chance that he has a rough summer, he has a rough training camp, and he just doesn't earn a spot out of camp. That tends to happen sometimes. But the way that he's been able to progress since joining the organization, from his first day of training camp to the last, and how much better he got, and which is why he earned that opportunity out of camp, why he was the guy that took advantage of Brian Rust being injured for the first 2 games of the season. And the way that he's also done that throughout this regular season with Wilkes-Barre. He started the year, he wasn't the team leader in ice time every night. He wasn't scoring every single night. He wasn't close to a point per game or over a point per game every night. He was struggling to score. He was trying to figure things out. It was professional hockey for the very first time. But he's grown as the season has continued, and he's gotten better as the season continued. And now he's one of the top guys on one of the top teams at the American Hockey League level. If he continues to do that, which all indications are that he will, but you never know because development fluctuates for everybody. But if he continues on that path, I don't see a world in which he is not playing NHL games in the 2025-26 season. And let's go to Jackson again to close things out. If Marner were to be traded to the Penguins next season, I doubt it. Glad you threw that in there. Would Raquel move down to Gino's line? Raquel seems to be doing great with Sidney Crosby. If Raquel, Marner, and Rust are all on this team, Brian Rust is the guy that's going to move next to Evgeni Malkin. First reason, there's proof of concept more with Malkin than there is with anybody else. Brian Rust and Evgeni Malkin have had a lot of success together. And Brian Rust has proven while he's very good with Crosby, he can also be very good with Evgeni Malkin. So Rust would be the guy to move down. That's reason number one. Reason number two, and we have seen this play out ever since Rickard Rakell touched foot in a Penguins sweater. Rakell is noticeably better and has noticeably more success when he's playing with Crosby than he's playing with Malkin. That's why everybody and their mother was screaming from the mountaintops last year when Rakell was struggling. Why can we not just leave him with Sidney Crosby and let everything else switch around them? We saw it this year. He's played consistently with Crosby, and look at that. He's the team leader in goals. He's on pace to score a career high of 34 plus goals still, and he's on pace for a career high in points as well. Leave him with Sidney Crosby. Even if you bring in Mitch Marner. Marner, Crosby, Rakell is your first line. Rust, Malkin, Tomasino is your second line. I got to check the handedness. But to me, off the top of my dome, that sounds like a pretty dang good top six for next year. If, again, in the slim chance that the Penguins go out and acquire Mitch Marner. But that's going to do it for this episode of Tip of the Ice-Burgh Live. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. A lot of comments, a lot of questions this week. Appreciate you guys jumping in. Sorry that we missed last week. I was dealing with some illnesses, wasn't able to come on live, but appreciate everybody joining here this week. We will be back next week with a live Tip of the Ice-Burgh on Wednesday at 2 p.m. But in the meantime, make sure that you check out our page for full episodes of Tip of the Ice-Burgh, for clips, for more Penguins content every single day. That's it for this one. We'll see you guys next time.